Okay, let's talk about project risk management. You learn what it is, why you need it, and what are the processes in the framework. And throughout the whole video, I will share some practical tips on how to do it efficiently. So, what is a risk? Let's assume that you have a project and you planned it perfectly. You made perfect estimations, you identified all the scope of work, and so on. And the project team started implementation and unexpectedly a piece of equipment breaks down and the whole project is blocked. You don't have extra money in your project budget to fix it or to find a new piece of equipment. So what can you do? You can go to the sponsor or the customer of the project and ask them for this money. It's totally okay if they pay for these kind of expenses, but the problem is you don't know if this sponsor has this money right now. Quite possible you'll need to wait for additional budget for some time before you can continue the work on the project. And here is an unpleasant truth. You as a project manager is responsible to be ready to avoid such delays, so you will be blamed. And therefore possibility of the equipment breakdown is a risk. Or here's another more common example. You have an experienced software development on your team and only she can finish a critical part of your project. And suddenly she got sick and out of work. Now the whole schedule goes to hell because there is no one to substitute this person for this week while she is on a sick leave. Now you need to make adjustment to the schedule, but you find out that because of your commitments your clients planned some advertisement activities and they put a lot of money into it. Okay, I can hear that someone of you already say that, okay Dmitry, I have buffers for all tasks, all deliverables, and even the whole project in general. And if something like that happens, we'll use this buffer. Well, yes, that's a valid approach, but professional project managers don't do that. Do you know why? First of all, you can't control how much each separate risk consumed of your buffer. So sooner or later you will be in this situation when a new risk will appear and it will impact the schedule or budget directly. Second, there is no way to prove that you have enough buffer to cover all critical risks. And third, if you need to deliver your project results in pieces like deliverables on certain dates, your whole project plan will be bloated with buffers all around. Your clients won't like it. So for such events and conditions that may or may not happen and that may have different kinds of impacts on project, we have project risk management. And before we move on, I want you to always keep in mind one important concept. Risks can impact all the aspects of a project. For example, an additional piece of scope may introduce risks to the schedule. But likewise, poorly identified requirements may introduce risks to budget, scope, schedule and quality. So don't limit your risk management efforts only on budget or schedule risks. Risks can appear in every aspect of the project and in the result they will impact other aspects. Okay, let's move on. What processes are included in the project risk management framework? Usually we have planning of risk management, identification of risks, qualitative risk analysis, quantitative risk analysis, planning of risk response plans and implementation of risk response plans, and then monitoring of risks. By the way, there are many different risk management frameworks and this one comes from PMBOK 6th edition, but it doesn't mean that you can't use anything else that is present in your company already. Maybe you can use something from this video to enhance the framework that you currently use. Or in any case, you should be always on the lookout for opportunities to improve your current risk management framework. Let's talk about planning of risk management. Alright guys and girls, I do understand that a lot of you, especially those who are on small projects, will never write a risk management plan. For sure you can keep everything in your head, but I do recommend you to create at least the outline of what you want to do and how you do it on your project. So, what do you need to describe or think through to produce a risk management plan? I recommend you to start from selecting or creating a risk register template. And by the way, I have a separate video on the risk register, and if you want to get my template, do watch the video after you watch this one. I'll leave you a link in the description. Then you need to think through how you will identify risks, and it includes when you should do it and what techniques you will apply. We'll talk about risk identification in just a minute. Also, you may need to talk with your clients and other stakeholders to understand the tolerance and thresholds for risks in certain areas. Because sometimes clients will take on the risks that relate to the scope, but they have tight budget and therefore they don't want to see any risks to budget, and you will focus on such risk in the first priority. I also have an article on this topic, and if you want to dive deeper, I'll leave you a link in the description. Next we have risk identification, and the best tactic is when you identify risk continuously throughout the whole project lifetime. But it's not that simple because you and your project team need to be proficient in all risk management activities. Everyone should know what to do about it. So, quite possible you will just have specific moments on the project when you identify risks. But before we move on to risk identification, you need to make sure that your project team is clear on where the risk register is, who can write in it the new entries, and who is responsible to keeping it up to date. So, what risk identification techniques can you apply on your project? Let me give you some examples. The first one is analysis of risk categories. Ideally, every project manager in your company should collect lessons learned after each project. And a part of them is the risk categories that happened on this project. So, project after project, you collect valuable information about risk categories that happen in your company and your industry in general. If your company doesn't have risk categories, I have an article that lists dozens and dozens of risk categories that you can use as a starting point for your risk identification activities. Then we have requirements review, and that's something that you will do most often. When you discuss your requirements with your team, you need to ask yourself all the time, what can go wrong with implementing this new requirement? Did we account for all possible use cases? And believe me, poorly identified requirements is the #1 source of risks on a project. The next technique is the review of the project management plan with your project team. So for example, here you can review work breakdown structure with your team to ensure that all project scope is identified. You can review project schedule to ensure that people will be working during those days when you need to create critical deliverables. The same goes for budget, quality, and actually all the aspects of project management. And by the way, you can review your project management plan with other stakeholders as well, not only with your team members. Then we have good old brainstorming, and you can put these brainstorming sessions at any point of time during your planning process or execution process of the project. Next, you can apply root cause analysis, and it usually works well on risks that regularly appear inside your company. This way you can identify risks early on and maybe fix the root cause of the problem. And last but not least, you must analyze your assumptions, because assumptions is the second biggest source of risks. You make assumptions throughout the whole project lifetime, and you base your decisions on these assumptions. That's why I do recommend you to keep the log of assumptions visible to your team and your clients all the time. The next process in risk management is the analysis of identified risks, and it all starts with qualitative risk analysis. Okay, here is another important aspect that you need to always keep in mind. Risk management is not free of charge. Each risk response plan that you will develop later is a part of your project. It's a part of your scope, your schedule, and your budget. And in the real world, you won't be able to address all the risks that you identified because it's just too costly. That's why you need to create a short list of risks that you will proactively fight against. You do qualitative risk analysis by identifying the impact and probability for each risk, and you use relative units of measurements like low, medium, and high. So by analyzing the impact and probability and maybe taking into the consideration the thresholds and tolerance of risks by your customers, you will create the list of risks that you will address. You can go further with the analysis by applying the quantitative risk analysis, and here you will identify monetary value of each risk and its impact. Likewise, it may help you to prove that addressing a risk in a certain way will be more cost efficient. But again, it all boils down to selecting a certain list of risks that has the highest impact on the project and may lead to the project failure. By the way, the sponsor of this video is my free career change cheat sheet for project managers. I know firsthand how hard it is to become a project manager. That's why this cheat sheet gives you an action plan on how to become a project manager in 3 months. So if you want to become a project manager, do get your copy, I'll leave you a link in the description. The next step is planning of risk responses. So you identified the risks, you selected the risks that have the most impact on the project. Now you need to find out the way and create an action plan to mitigate the probability or impact of these risks, or to avoid them at all. And I want to repeat it once again, the risk response plans are the part of your project. It's a part of the project scope, it's a part of your budget and schedule. And likewise, it's a part of the project management in general, because sometimes risk responses requires you to introduce new processes and workflows. Also, you can passively accept a risk, which means you will just allocate some amount of money or time to address the impact of the risk if it happens. So these are your risk reserves of time and money that will transparently go into the budget or schedule. It's just like the buffers that you use right now. The only difference is that each risk reserve is tied to specific risk and you can't use it to cover up other problems. And you will approve these risk reserves with your clients. The next step is to implement the risk responses that you developed. The risk responses are like sub-projects in your overall big project. And here's the important thing. You are not the only person who can implement risk responses. And quite often, you are not the most suitable person to implement risk responses that relate to technical aspects of the project. So you will need to assign an owner to each risk and delegate this work to other people. Therefore, your responsibility is to control their work and to ensure that they act upon the risk in a timely manner. The next process is monitoring risks, and you do it throughout the whole project lifecycle. It's not a one-time activity. I know some of you may think that if you have a lot of low probability, low impact risks, why do we need to care about them and log them into a risk register at all? So here's another crucial risk management concept that you need to keep in mind. A risk can change its impact and the probability because of different events or conditions on your project. So you need to review your risk register to ensure that risks are on the same place as they were during your project planning. But likewise, new risks may appear as well, and you want to start tracking them as soon as possible. And it goes without saying that if you identified a new severe risk during project execution, you will have to ask for a change and to address this new risk. Also, yes, you plan the risk responses, but it doesn't guarantee that these responses will be efficient against the risk when it happens. So sometimes when a risk happened and you try to implement a risk response, it doesn't work, or it introduces new risks that you need to fight against. That is why you monitor risks and control the implementation of risk responses by others. You need to develop a process where a risk owner reports to you on the progress of risk response implementation or how the risk develops in general. There is one more crucial thing that you need to work on every project almost every day. You need to teach your team members and stakeholders How to do risk management. You need to explain how your risk management framework works on this project. So if you want to become a project manager who knows how to deal with risk management on a real life project, do get the career change cheat sheet. I left you a link in the description. And if you don't want to miss videos on project management and leadership like this one, do subscribe to this channel and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you for watching, I'll see you in the next one.